Online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Our wedding day, but not as large.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Someday in Manhattan yesterday with former President Trump being arraigned in New York State Court. And then ending the day with remarks at Mar-a-Lago. We'll get to it all. But first, the big question that came out of yesterday. Who was that attractive blonde officer that was guarding the courthouse doors? I believe Trump requested her for the handcuffing.
Yeah, I was saying maybe his next love interest. No, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, she was easy on the eyes, I will agree.
Alvin Bragg, he's the Manhattan DA who's brought this case.
Such a hero. Huh?
He had this to say yesterday.
These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct.
Yeah. Nope, not going to normalize serious criminal conduct. I mean, except in the case of Rodney Johnson, who had 90 arrests on his rap sheet and 2 stints in state prison, and saw his felony robbery charges knocked down to misdemeanors by Bragg's office last week. So when he was upcharging Trump on business records violations to felonies, he was downcharging a guy with a 35-year criminal career with misdemeanors. But, I mean, I understand that's the order of the day because the office is for politics. It's not for public safety. It's not for prosecuting repeat offenders. I understand.
And there was no there when talking about, what exactly is the crime that he was trying to conceal? Because I didn't get that in the 34-page or the 16-page 34-count indictment.
We're going to talk to Andy McCarthy momentarily on that, but here's what Trump's lawyers had to say about the indictment once it was unsealed and the charges contained therein. Any surprises, gentlemen? First Todd Blanche and then Joe Tecopina on the charges.
I know there was a lot of talk over the past several weeks and the past several days about what's going to be in this indictment and what's going to be there that we don't know. There must be something besides what we've been talking about for the past 4 or 5 years. There wasn't. There's nothing. The indictment itself is boilerplate. It doesn't allege any federal crime, any state crime that's been violated. It doesn't allege what the false statement is. And it's really disappointing. It's sad, and we're going to fight it. We're going to fight it hard.
Were you surprised by anything in the indictment?
No.
How about you, Joe? Were you surprised?
Yeah, I was surprised there were no facts in there. I mean, normally in an indictment you have alleged facts. So they said that this was a false business record entry to aid and abet another crime without saying what the other crime was.
And the 8th count was about April 13th, 2017. The Access Hollywood, that was when the video was released. How is that a white-collar crime? How is this anything new? I mean, my God, even John Bolton, who's no friend of Trump, said that this complaint can easily be dismissed because it's thin.
Well, we'll get expert opinion on that by Andy McCarthy, who is a contributing editor to National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, and a former top prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. Andy McCarthy, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Anything surprise you about the indictment?
Just that the theory of it is that Trump stole the 2016 election by fraud. The 2016 election occurred on November 8th, 2016. The 34 counts in the indictment go from February 14th of 2017 until December 5th of 2017. So even if you think those charges are crimes, and I think it's, 34 descriptions of certainly not crime, whatever it is. But it's not conceivable, even if you bought Bragg's theory that what Trump did was fraudulent, you can't steal by fraud in 2017 something that occurred in 2016. So it doesn't, just on its face and on the terms that that Bragg describes, it doesn't make any sense. It's incoherent.
Okay, so in New York, the only way to be charged with a felony count, you have to be found to have been trying to hide a second crime. What is the second crime? Does anybody know?
Well, the indictment fails as an indictment. I mean, technically speaking, in the criminal law, an indictment has two purposes. One is to put the defendant on notice of the crime that's charged, so that he can prepare his defense at trial. And the second is the indictment is supposed to stand as a definition of what the crime charge was, so that if any prosecutor ever again tries to prosecute for the same crime, you have the indictment as your double jeopardy defense. Here, he doesn't say what the crime is, because the 34 counts accuse Trump of falsifying business records with a fraudulent intent to conceal another crime. And in order for the indictment to be sufficient, he's got to say what the other crime is. That nowhere in the indictment does it say what the other crime is. And I would say that even a less visible but just as real and just as serious problem is that even if Bragg won't tell Trump and won't tell the rest of us what the other crime is, he has to have told the grand jury, because for an indictment to be a real indictment, the grand jury has to have found probable cause of every element of the crime. So if Bragg got a grand jury to indict on a theory that Trump concealed a crime, the grand jury has to have found what the crime was and that there was probable cause that Trump committed it. So the fact that Bragg doesn't put that in the indictment indicates that he didn't instruct the grand jury on what the other crime was. If he didn't do that, then the indictment should just be thrown out for that reason.
Well, I mean, Andy, they learn to do things differently at Harvard Law. So, you got to give this legal artist some bandwidth to ply his trade, as he was trained at Harvard Law. I just note that because this is being noted about as a sort of credentializing Alvin Bragg, so you don't have to look at the quality of the work product. Actually, I want to play this little bite for you. This is not the four corners of the case, but it's the sort of response you're getting from the populace and the devolution of the rule of law that has been increased and may increase still. Ari Fleischer was on with Hannity yesterday, and here's what he suggested the response from members of the legal community around the country should be to this indictment.
One of the raps against Donald Trump is that he violates the norms. And as a result, the Democrats had no choice. Prosecutors had no choice. But Sean, what's happened to Donald Trump is actually the real violation of the norms. He was impeached the first time by a process that did not even go through the Judiciary Committee. They wrecked the Bipartisan Intelligence Committee at the hands of Adam Schiff to get Donald Trump. The second time they tried to impeach him, knowing it would not succeed, they didn't even go through that process. They put it right on the floor and shoved it down everybody's throats. And now you have a prosecutor, an overwhelmingly lopsidedly, ideologically Democrat, 85-15 Democrat to Republican Manhattan, going after Donald Trump. Here's what I hope happens next, Sean. I earnestly hope that conservative prosecutors in rural areas of America indict Bill Clinton, indict Hillary Clinton, indict Hunter Biden. Their only way to stop this and return to the norms is for one side to realize if they go too far, the other will match them. And that is not the way we settle our disputes in America. They should be settled at the ballot box, not through the courts. But Republicans cannot unilaterally disarm. You can't let them try to interfere in the 2024 election by doing to Donald Trump what they're doing. And I say that as somebody who will criticize Donald Trump when he goes too far. The Democrats are violating the norms, and they're especially doing it through this case, this weak case in Manhattan.
Now, I know he's conflating issues when he talks about impeachment and then a criminal prosecution. One is intrinsically political, the other is not supposed to be. But So setting that aside for a moment, what do you think about his eye for an eye response to reestablishing something less politicized when it comes to law enforcement?
Well, I'm not going to have a satisfying answer to this. I disagree with Ari.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think Ari agrees with Ari, because Ari said, in the same sentence, Ari said, "This is what we have to do," and then said, "This is not what we do in America." So,
wow, right.
I think he's got a sort of internal contradiction with that. But I think, to my mind, I'm not on the left because I don't want to be the left.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to do what they do. But I don't have I hear what he's saying about unilateral disarmament. I don't think to play, to fight back, that you have to commit the same illegalities that they commit, but there has to be something punitive done about this. For example, I've said that these Republican congressmen who were trying to get, subpoena Bragg and make him appear before their committee and all that stuff, I don't think they have any authority to do that. I think they ought to take every penny away from the states, who have these kinds of progressive prosecutors who are, on the one hand, not enforcing the laws against people who are preying on the citizens of New York and other cities around America, and at the other side of the spectrum, are exploiting their powers and putting them in the service of their partisan agenda against their political enemies. So, we need to do things like that. We absolutely have to. There has to be blood spilt over this. I mean that in the rhetorical sense. But I don't think it could be illegal. I don't want to see us using the law extortionately against our enemies, because if we're not them because we reject what they do, I don't see how becoming them helps.
That's a satisfying answer for me. Yeah. I'm satisfied.
All right, so prosecutors wanted essentially a gag order, but the judge said no, but he did ask Trump not to post on Truth Social anything that could incite violence. He doesn't have a right to free speech anymore?
Well, no, he just told them don't incite violence. That's okay, right? Inciting violence is a crime. Look, the judge had to say something, right? It's like, Amy, if I said to you, "Hey, Amy, this week, don't murder anyone, okay?"
I won't.
You see all right with that, right? Okay. But then I'd say we're good, right? I don't need to put an order in because Amy tells me she's not going to kill anyone. Trump says he's not going to go incite violence. He didn't tell him that he couldn't, robustly exploit his First Amendment rights. And, if I'm the judge in that courtroom, I would have turned to Bragg and said, did you charge him with incitement of violence? Do you have an indictment? I see an indictment here that has 34 counts but no crime. Now you're telling me he incited violence. Have you indicted him for inciting violence? Because last I looked, inciting violence is a crime. And if Bragg says, no, I haven't indicted him for inciting violence, I'd probably tell him something along the lines of, sit down and shut up.
Well, exactly. So, so that's the problem I have with the judge saying, promise me you're not going to incite violence. Well, I don't incite violence. Why are you asking me to? Why don't you ask Alvin Bragg to promise that he won't incite violence too, since he's the political demagogue who ran his campaign on prosecuting me. It starts from a premise that Trump is prone to incite violence, which should be rejected for exactly as you explained.
Yeah, but Dan, given what our expectations would be for a Manhattan judge, I thought the guy did fine. He didn't do anything, right? Everybody thought he was going to gag order him, and that didn't happen.
So, what's your and Takapina has talked a little bit about this. Another Trump attorney trustee has talked a little bit about this in terms of what a motion to dismiss would look like. Some of the issues that could be raised when we get to that stage of the proceeding. What's your intuition about the likelihood of success of a motion to dismiss in this case now that the indictment has been unsealed?
If the judge does his job right, this case should be dismissed instantly. In fact, I would be in there today with a motion to dismiss because the indictment fails to state a charge for the reasons that we discussed. Before you even get to the statute of limitations, which shows that the case is time barred, if you interpret it correctly, and the fact that Bragg, to the extent that he's suggesting that federal campaign finance laws were violated here, he doesn't have jurisdiction to enforce those. Leave aside that they weren't violated. He doesn't have jurisdiction over that. To the extent he's saying that state election laws may have been violated, state election laws don't apply to presidential elections, so that's nonsense. So there's a whole bunch of independent reasons why this thing should go. But the most fundamental problem here is that the indictment fails as an indictment, because an indictment, to be sufficient in American law, has to put the defendant on notice of what the crime is. How can Donald Trump prepare for trial if he hasn't been told what crime he is accused in a felony 30
these are different. Well, these are different times. I mean, in the January 6th cases, the prosecution is apparently not compelled to provide potentially exculpatory evidence to the defense anymore. In this case, you don't have to explain to a criminal defendant what the charges are. That's all. Just different times. I wanted to get your. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, look. All I'm saying is, I think there's a lot of grounds to dismiss this.
Yeah.
But I think there should be an immediate dismissal because it's not an indictment.
Yeah. No, I got failure to state a claim. I get it. Failure to state a charge.
No, you're right. You're right.
Well, I wanted to get your take on one other thing from Sunday when Cy Vance, the previous Manhattan DA, appeared with Chuck Todd, and he was asked, "Well, so why didn't you charge in this case?" He said, "Well, the U.S. Attorney's Office told me to stand down, and since I have so much respect for the U.S. Attorney's Office, I stood down." That was his cover story. What do you think of that response?
The U.S. Attorney's Office, which is my old office, the Southern District of New York, publicly filed something that said they had dismissed the case against Trump in 2020. And last I read, the Justice Department's been under new management since January 21st or 20th of 2021. So for 27 months, and I guess if you go back and add the time since they dismissed it for close to 3 years, this case, the feds were not moving on this case, and everybody knew it. So there was no reason, if Cy Vance decided to pick up the torch and do this case, there was nothing stopping him.
Mm-hmm.
So prosecutors want to push the case to January, at the heart of the Republican primaries. The next hearing is December 4th, and the judge is demanding that former President Trump be present. There's no need for him to be there, and that's going to cost millions of dollars in security for, extra police and overtime.
Yeah, I'd say two things about that, Amy. First, there's a long time. There's an eternity between now and then, right? 8 months. We don't know how the world will look different then. They can go back to the court and say, look, it really is a waste. If all we're going to do is come in here and have an argument about motions and there's no hearings required, then it would be ridiculous to make this guy come up from Florida. And I think that at that point, maybe the judge will listen to reason. But they have 8 months to convince him of that. And the second thing is, if you're not going to have a hearing in this case until December, I don't see how on earth you get a trial in January. Right. Because presumably the hearing in December is going to be to decide whatever motions can be decided on the papers and then to schedule whatever hearings have to take place before trial. So it seems to me like, this is a very congested court, the criminal court in Manhattan, and it seems to me that we're, if they don't go back again until December, they're months away from having a trial. But for all we know, by then Trump could be indicted in 3 other places.
Right.
And the world looks completely different. So I would just, let's just see how it plays out.
Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney, Southern District of New York, that's Manhattan, as you heard, contributing editor at National Review, author of the bestseller Ball of Collusion, The Plot to Rig an Election and Destroy a Presidency. Andy, thanks as always for your insights. Appreciate it.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, and he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to podcasts of Dan and Amy from the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. Your business and your money are in good hands with Signature